There exists a kind of violence that leaves no visible scars, no bruises for the world to see, no traces that medical tests can detect, yet it quietly reshapes the very foundation of a person's psyche. Growing up under the emotional weight of toxic parents is a silent trauma, one that doesn't break bones but bends identities. During childhood, the human brain is not just developing physically, it's wiring itself around the emotional environment that surrounds it. Contrary to what many believe, it is not merely food, shelter, or education that builds a child. It is the emotional bond. When that bond is unstable, manipulative, neglectful, or emotionally absent, what forms is not simply a difficult childhood. It becomes an invisible wound that echoes throughout a lifetime. John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist and founder of attachment theory, uncovered something profoundly unsettling. He showed that the way we are treated by our caregivers in our earliest years fundamentally shapes how we see ourselves, how we connect with others, and how we interpret the world. This is not poetry, it is neurobiology. It is emotional programming inscribed deep within the child's nervous system. When parents, who should be a safe haven, become unpredictable sources of anxiety, the child learns to live in a constant state of emotional alert. When love is inconsistent, given warmly one moment, withdrawn coldly the next, the child internalizes a cruel belief that affection must be earned, that love is conditional, and that they themselves are not enough. They begin to suppress their emotions, to please, to perform, walking on eggshells just to maintain a fragile sense of safety. This emotional instability is the breeding ground for what Bowlby termed anxious ambivalent attachment, a pattern marked by deep insecurity, hypersensitivity to rejection, and a desperate need for validation. These children grow into adults who confuse love with anxiety, who mistake intensity for intimacy, and who sacrifice their true selves just to feel accepted. And the most tragic part, many never realize they were emotionally abused. They were taught to be grateful for the roof, the food, the good intentions. They were conditioned to feel guilty for their pain, to silence their unmet needs, and to normalize the chaos they grew up in. This confusion between love and suffering becomes the invisible thread that ties their adult relationships to the wounds of their past. They blame themselves for not being happy, unaware that their unhappiness is not a flaw, but an echo, a symptom of a childhood shaped by fear and emotional deprivation. This video is a deep exploration of that hidden reality. Together, we'll dive into Bowlby's groundbreaking insights and the latest psychological research to understand how toxic parenting shapes a child's emotional brain, how these patterns persist into adulthood, and most importantly, what can be done to break the cycle. Because the pain you feel is not a weakness. It's a message, a sign of something that began long ago, and that now finally deserves to be understood. Not every toxic parent screams, humiliates, or raises a hand. More often the poison seeps in quietly, subtle, almost invisible, and precisely because of that, far more destructive. A toxic parent can be one who never shouts, yet makes their child feel unseen. It can be the mother who says, "It's for your own good," while emotionally manipulating every decision. Or the father who mistakes control for care, fear for authority, and dependence for love. Parental toxicity rarely shows itself through extremes. It hides in the everyday, in small rejections, in words that dismiss, in the sigh of disappointment, or in absences that are never acknowledged. A parent doesn't need to be openly cruel to inflict damage. All it takes is emotional inconsistency. One day they embrace you, the next they turn away. The child, unable to understand the reason for these shifts, concludes, "I must be the problem." And that's the cruelest trap. Love, which should be a refuge, turns into a landscape of uncertainty. The child begins to study every tone, every glance, every silence, scanning constantly for signs of danger. They adapt, shrink, and erase themselves, believing that this vigilance is what love means. But behind the behavior of most toxic parents lies something deeper, the echo of their own unresolved pain. Many are simply repeating the patterns they once endured, unaware that they are reenacting their trauma. The overprotective mother, for instance, may have grown up neglected and now confuses control with care. The harsh authoritarian father may once have been a terrified boy, believing that domination is the only form of strength, and so the cycle continues. Trauma becomes inheritance. Pain becomes a family language. The most tragic truth is that the child, even when wounded, still loves. Childhood love is unconditional, and that is what makes it so dangerous. When love and fear coexist, the developing brain receives a devastating message. The people who love me are also the ones who hurt me. This confusion becomes the seed of countless emotional struggles in adulthood. Chronic anxiety, perfectionism, relentless self-criticism, a desperate need for approval, and a constant fear of making mistakes. John Bowlby observed that humans are biologically wired to seek emotional security from their primary caregivers. When that need is frustrated through rejection, manipulation, or neglect, the attachment system, the very mechanism that regulates emotion and safety, begins to collapse. The child learns to live on high alert, bracing for love to vanish at any moment. What should be a temporary stress response becomes a permanent state of tension. The body forgets what calm feels like. Survival becomes the default mode, and love, instead of peace, becomes a source of anxiety. In homes ruled by emotional instability, children are forced to grow up too fast. They become experts at reading faces, predicting moods, soothing tempers, and hiding their own pain. They become caretakers of the very people meant to care for them. In doing so, they lose touch with their own identity, because to survive, they must stop being themselves. And this, in psychological terms, is a form of disappearance. But perhaps the most profound damage of all doesn't lie in behavior. It lies in the invisible blueprint that forms inside the mind. Bowlby called it the internal working model, the unconscious map through which we view ourselves, others, and the world. When this map is forged in a toxic environment, it becomes distorted, filled with fear, doubt, and shame. It shapes how a person will love, trust, and even see their own worth. And it is this internal map, this psychological mold born of pain, that we will explore in the next part. Imagine a child's mind as a blank page. Every word, every gesture, every silence, and every outburst from their parents writes something upon that page. Over time, those marks turn into a silent manual, a hidden script that explains how the world works. This unseen manual is what John Bowlby called the internal working model, an unconscious, psychological blueprint that shapes how a person perceives themselves, others, and every relationship they will ever form. This model isn't built through reasoning or reflection. It doesn't come from logic, it comes from repetition. The child doesn't consciously think, "My parents are emotionally unstable, therefore I can't trust them." Instead, they feel something much more personal and painful. Something must be wrong with me. That's why I don't get the love I need. And that feeling, that deep, wordless conclusion, becomes the foundation of their identity. Toxic parents teach without words that love is conditional. It must be earned, negotiated, deserved. The child learns to disappear in exchange for acceptance. To be loved, they must be perfect or invisible. They must not complain, not fail, not show weakness or anger. And when they inevitably fall short, as every human being does, they turn against themselves. The inner script is already written. If I'm not loved, it must be my fault. The danger of this internal model lies in its invisibility. It operates quietly beneath awareness, becoming the emotional background of life. Even when the person grows up, moves away, and builds a new existence, the old script continues to run in the shadows. A small criticism at work feels like a personal rejection. An unanswered message triggers panic. A minor mistake becomes proof of unworthiness. The internal model also dictates how one manages emotions. If they were punished for crying, they learn to silence sadness. If fear was ignored, they learn never to ask for help. If anger was mocked, they learn to bury it until it erupts uncontrollably. The result is an adult cut off from their own emotional world, projecting strength on the outside while quietly falling apart within. Bowlby explained that the internal working model allows humans to predict, interpret, and respond to the behavior of attachment figures. But when those attachment figures are toxic, the predictions twist into distortions. People will leave me. I am not worthy of love. If I let my guard down, I'll be hurt. And the cruelest irony is that these beliefs often become self-fulfilling, not because they are true, but because the person unconsciously recreates the same emotional patterns that validate them, choosing partners, friends, or situations that feel painfully familiar. It is a cycle of self-sabotage, powered by a logic written long ago in childhood. And perhaps the most tragic part is that this toxic script feels normal. Familiarity feels like safety. Emotional chaos, no matter how painful, feels like home. So when the person finally encounters genuine calm, stable love, consistent care, quiet peace, it feels wrong. The silence feels threatening. The safety feels foreign. They may even pull away, not because they want pain, but because pain is what they know. Yet here lies the hopeful truth. If this model was built through painful experiences, it can also be rewritten through awareness, through healing, through new emotional experiences that teach the brain that love can exist without fear. Because what was once programmed through pain can, with time and understanding, be reprogrammed through compassion. What happens when the only source of safety in a child's life is also the source of their fear? This is the heartbreaking paradox at the core of anxious ambivalent attachment, devastating emotional configuration that forms when parents, instead of being predictable and emotionally secure, become inconsistent, erratic, and unstable. These are the parents who one day embrace and praise, and the next day ignore, ridicule, or punish without warning. Parents who make their child feel loved one moment and unwanted the next. A young mind has no tools to process such contradiction, and it's here, in this emotional chaos, that the attachment system begins to short-circuit. Instead of learning that the world is safe and that their needs will be met consistently, the child learns something else entirely, that love is uncertain, that affection is a reward to be earned, never guaranteed. Every hug carries the fear that it might be the last. Every moment of warmth is shadowed by anxiety, as if love always demands a hidden payment. John Bowlby identified that this kind of attachment creates a permanent state of internal vigilance. The child becomes hyper-attuned to their parents' moods, studying every shift in tone, every glance, every pause, searching for signs of danger. Their nervous system learns to live on high alert. And this hyperactivation isn't just psychological, it's biological. The body itself begins to associate closeness with tension. The caregiver's physical presence, instead of offering comfort, triggers anxiety, because emotionally, they're never truly there. The result is a child who never relaxes, a child who confuses fear with connection, who learns that love always comes with unease. And this pattern doesn't disappear with age. It grows. In adulthood, the person with anxious, ambivalent attachment carries this same emotional imprint into every relationship. No matter how much love they receive, it never feels secure. They fear abandonment, rejection, betrayal, even when none of these threats are real. They crave closeness, yet dread the pain it might bring. They move back and forth, pulling others close, then pushing them away, trapped in a draining dance of approach and avoidance. This emotional choreography was learned long ago, and now the brain replays it automatically, as if it were the only way to relate. Adults shaped by this kind of attachment often carry distorted beliefs about love and self-worth. They believe they must earn affection. They struggle to trust. They live with a constant undercurrent of guilt and inadequacy. Even when everything seems fine, peace feels foreign. Stability feels suspicious. And the constant hum of anxiety, unbearable to others, feels to them like home. The cruelest aspect of this pattern is that it feeds on itself. Feeling insecure, the person may become clingy, demanding, jealous, or emotionally volatile. These reactions push others away, confirming the very fear that drives them. I will always be left. I will always be too much or not enough. It's a loop of pain, a self-fulfilling prophecy written in childhood and replayed throughout life. But perhaps the most tragic element of anxious attachment is this. Even when such a person finally meets someone stable, loving, and emotionally secure, someone safe, they often feel no spark. Their nervous system, long accustomed to confusion and chaos, does not recognize safety as love. It feels dull. It feels wrong. And so begins a new kind of suffering, the quiet tragedy of rejecting what heals and longing for what hurts. This inversion of perception, where a healthy relationship feels bland and a toxic one feels intense, is not a mystery of love, but a sign of conditioning. It is the emotional brain, still loyal to its earliest lessons, unconsciously trying to recreate the familiar pain of childhood in an attempt to fix what once broke us. But the past cannot be healed through repetition. It can only be healed through understanding. And this is where real change begins. In the next part, we will see how these patterns continue to echo into adulthood, even when we believe we have escaped them, because the effects of toxic parenting do not fade with time. They quietly infiltrate our decisions, our emotions, and our closest relationships. Many people grow up believing that adulthood automatically brings freedom, that once they move out, earn their own money, and build their own lives, the influence of their parents will end. But psychology and lived experience tells a different story. Growing up with toxic parents does not simply end with age. It does not remain locked away in childhood like a closed chapter. It becomes part of our inner architecture, a psychological mold that operates silently, shaping how we live, feel, and connect. It is not just an unpleasant memory. It is a living pattern. It colors the way we see ourselves, how we interpret the world, how we respond under stress, how we choose partners, and how we give and receive love. Even our thoughts, the inner voice that narrates our days, often speak in the tone of those early caregivers. An adult raised under emotionally unstable or abusive parents often does not realize that many of their current struggles, such as perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of rejection, or emotional dependency, are not random flaws but echoes of the emotional training they received in childhood. The child they once were did not disappear. That child grew up within them, still longing for the love, validation, and safety they never received. And until that part is finally seen, understood, and healed, it continues to guide the story from behind the curtain. The constant self-criticism, the difficulty making decisions, the habit of apologizing for everything, the fear of voicing opinions, the sense of inadequacy in social settings, the persistent feeling of being a burden. All of these are echoes of a past where love was conditional, unpredictable, or absent. Often, people don't even realize something is wrong. They tell themselves they are too sensitive, too intense, too complicated. They internalize the lesson that they are the problem, a message delivered repeatedly through years of emotional invalidation. When they cried, they were told, "Stop making a scene." When they expressed anger, they were called ungrateful. When they sought attention, they were met with silence. Slowly, they learned not to trust their own feelings. And when a person loses the right to trust themselves, they lose connection with who they truly are. Bowlby explained that over time, the internal working model, the attachment blueprint, becomes the primary lens through which reality is interpreted. This means that someone raised in emotional instability may spend years repeating self-destructive patterns without knowing why. They may avoid opportunities for fear of failure. They may steer clear of deep relationships to avoid pain. They may chase impossible goals just to feel worthy. All of this is guided by emotional programming created before they were even fully aware of themselves. Toxic parents also instill a dysfunctional loyalty. Questioning their behavior feels like ingratitude. Suffering becomes normalized, and as adults, These individuals feel guilt when they assert boundaries, say no, or distance themselves. Many remain emotionally tethered to abusive parents, not out of love, but due to a system of psychic obedience formed through fear and conditioning. This emotional legacy also shapes how they treat themselves. The criticized child becomes a self-critic. The ignored child learns to neglect their own needs. The manipulated child doubts their own decisions. Essentially, the adult becomes their own tormentor, unconsciously perpetuating what they once endured. But there is hope. Bowlby emphasized that attachment patterns, while powerful, are not permanent. They can be transformed. The first step is cultivating what psychology calls earned secure attachment, healing that requires awareness, effort, and the courage to break old conditioning. Even if childhood left deep scars, it is possible to reprogram the nervous system and reshape emotional patterns. Earned secure attachment means creating an internal state of stability and trust, even for those who never experienced it in childhood. Secure attachment isn't just about feeling good in relationships. It's an internal sense of safety. It is knowing, even in moments of struggle, that you are worthy of care. It is trusting yourself, acknowledging your emotions without fear, setting boundaries without guilt. For someone raised in unstable homes, this security may feel foreign, even threatening. The nervous system has been trained to link love with tension, attention with unpredictability, and affection with the risk of rejection. The first step is recognizing that your body may still operate as if trapped in the past. You may know rationally that your parents were abusive. You may have read, studied, or gone to therapy, but if your nervous system is still on alert, you will continue to react as if the old environment persists. This explains why you might sabotage yourself when life is going well, feel anxious when praised, or distrust kindness. Reprogramming begins with awareness, noticing triggers, understanding when emotional reactions are echoes of past wounds, and learning that not every perceived rejection is real. This requires presence, a presence that was denied to you for so many years. Next comes the practice of tolerating stability. For someone raised in chaos, a healthy relationship may feel dull, a genuine friendship uncomfortable, a moment of peace unfamiliar. This is because the nervous system has been conditioned to thrive in tension. Change comes through repetition, creating safe emotional experiences, even small ones. Being with people who validate your feelings, saying no without apology, accepting help without guilt, allowing yourself to fail without shame. Each experience sends a clear message to your brain: I am safe now. Over time, these new experiences reshape your internal model, building trust, not fear. Bowlby highlighted the importance of corrective relationships. Connections where a person can finally experience what they were denied in childhood: consistency, empathy, and emotional acceptance. These bonds can be found in therapy, deep friendships, healthy romantic relationships, or even through self-compassion and mindful self-observation. Yet, achieving this new pattern also requires breaking loyalty to the old. It means stopping self-blame for distancing from toxic parents. It means accepting that you no longer need to prove yourself to be loved. It means realizing you can be whole even without their approval. This is perhaps the most liberating revelation. You can become the caregiver you never had. Within yourself lies the capacity to protect, guide, and nurture your own emotional life. It is not easy, it is not instant, but it is possible. Healing begins with a small act of rebellion, refusing to let pain define your destiny. Breaking the cycle of toxic parenting is one of life's most difficult decisions. It is hard because it requires confronting those who should have been safe harbors. It is hard because it challenges early lessons, that loyalty is absolute, that speaking up is exaggeration, that questioning parents is betrayal. But here is the truth, harsh yet freeing. Staying trapped in abusive bonds is not love. It is self-destruction. For years you may have tried to fix the relationship, to please, to explain yourself, to be understood. When nothing changed, you blamed yourself. You thought you were too sensitive, too ungrateful, too difficult. The problem was never you. The problem was growing up where your emotional needs were unseen. dismissed or punished. Toxic parents often wield guilt as a tool of control. They say, "I did everything for you. You were a difficult child. I was tough for your own good." But pain does not lie. And when you begin to recognize your pain as real and legitimate, liberation begins. You do not have to spend your life convincing your parents that you deserve to be loved. Breaking the cycle does not always mean cutting ties, though sometimes that is necessary. It means ending the emotional legacy that perpetuates generational trauma. It means choosing yourself, setting boundaries, saying enough to being the eternal scapegoat, demanding respect, even from those who brought you into the world. And most importantly, it means rebuilding your identity outside of their shadow. This process can bring loneliness, confusion, and grief. You are not merely ending a relationship. You are letting go of the hope that your parents will become what you always needed. And that hurts. But it also heals. In place of illusion emerges the real possibility of building something new. A life where you do not have to prove yourself, where love does not hurt, and where emotional peace is not mistaken for apathy. You owe nothing to those who violated your emotional safety. The greatest gratitude you can offer life is to heal, to live as someone whose trauma is no longer master, but starting point, where your story no longer ends as it began. That is courage. That is dignity.